as my family was going through all this, my people-pleasing tendency was off the charts. I was like picking friends who were hurting me. I was picking romantic partners who were just like couldn't have been worse for me. Here I am like texting her, calling her, being like, don't give up. Your life is so valuable. And then when I heard that from her, I was like, do I believe that about my own life based on how I've been treating it? Do I really believe like I'm infinitely valuable and precious? I had to relinquish like all this control over the situation and really trust that like my family could also, like each of my mom, my dad, my sister, we each could really do this.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us.
My name is Emma Grover. I'm 25 years old, and I was born in New York City, but I currently live in Oakland, California. And I started practicing Buddhism actually because I was born into this practice. So that means that both my mother and father practiced this Buddhism before I was born. And so essentially I've been practicing my entire existence and beyond that.
Was there like any point like in your childhood or growing up that you like started practicing really seriously, or were you always kind of like, oh yeah, I'm Buddhist and I chant?
Yeah, I think because my parents practice, I grew up around other practicing Buddhists. There was a Buddhist center not too far from my house that we would frequently go to, my family, or my parents would host just like discussion meetings at our house, which just meant people would come over and eat and make merry and study and chant together. And so I definitely grew up just around a lot of Buddhists and with a lot of Buddhism in my life. But I wouldn't say until college when I left home and when I was separated from my parents who are really strong, have really strong practices, I started to develop my own routine, my own relationship with Buddhism.
Yeah, totally. I think for a lot of people that grow up like in a Buddhist household, that kind of oftentimes is the period where people like you're figuring out kind of who you are as a person without your family. And yeah, so I think a lot of people really start kind of developing their own kind of relationship to their Buddhist practice at that time. So, I mean, today we're going to be talking a lot about like family harmony and what that really looks like. I mean, sometimes I think about the word family harmony and I think that means like, wow, everything is like so perfect and there's no problems and whatever. But we'll talk more like real today, what that actually looks like. So, to help give just like kind of some context into who you are, maybe you can just tell me a little bit about your family and like who you were growing up in relation to your family.
For sure. So I grew up in Manhattan in New York City. Like I mentioned before, my parents practiced and this Buddhism, and then I was born into this practice. And I have a little sister as well. Her name is Mina. We're 3 years apart. And as kids, I think it was very, very early on, very clear how different we were. Just like we actually were really good friends and we had a really close relationship for a really long time, which, we still fought like siblings and bickered and stole articles of clothing from each other without telling each other, all the classic sibling things. But I think because we were also so different, we were able to have a relationship that was really tender, built on sense of humor, connecting about things we like, doing activities together. But my sister is much cooler than I am, 100%. She's got tattoo sleeves, she's got this punk rock thing going, it's eyebrow piercing, and I'm just not those things, which is great, but so different. That wasn't the way she was as a child, but she was very rambunctious and energetic. Yeah, and then I, on the other hand, was actually really painfully shy. And my dad would bribe my friends to help get me to talk in class. Wow. Meet up with, I was that shy. He'd meet up with them and be please have Emma raise her hand once today. I was so shy. And I think even at elementary school, that's when I really started to notice that, people really like that I'm nice and that I can give and that I'm willing to share things or do nice things for them. And so even from early on, I started to develop this like tendency to base my sense of like value and worth on what I was able to give to other people, and how helpful or how valued I was by them. I always chose people who like didn't value me for who I was, but valued like what I could give them. And, this became like a lifelong tendency that I really had to work on. But part of how I was able to work through that was actually like my challenges with my family and like with my sister. And so on my dad's side of the family, addiction is really prevalent. And so I've got, uncles, many family members who are in recovery. And I think, you maybe when you're growing up in New York, you see things here and there. And like I had heard these stories about my family. It was like, I recognized that this was a thing, but I never really like thought about it too deeply until my little sister started showing signs of using substances and struggling with her mental health when she was in middle school. And that, only worsened in high school. And I think because of my dad's childhood and his relationship to this addiction in our family as well, like, of course, like, I was in high school at the time, she was in middle school, and my parents are just like in a panic. And I think like that's when when we're talking about like harmony, like so much harmony was broken, it was parents were in a panic. There were lots of family meetings, and it just felt like there's a lot of like disunity as well. And just like Mina breaking rules and my parents trying to kind of take control of her and make sure she doesn't do certain things. And I think because of my tendencies to put others before myself especially, and I really like became almost like a middleman for my parents and my sister at this time, like both trying to like keep my relationship with my sister by covering for her, by lying for her, and for my parents also just like trying to deliver messages from them and like help her be encouraged to stop doing these things. And so I ended up being in this really interesting position where I was just kind of trying to help everyone at the cost of my own mental health as well. And so I think just like during that time and as like things worsened, I just like really was stuck in this mindset of like people like to have me around because I can like be encouraging or bring energy or support them. And so even like with my own family, I would really get stuck in these ways of thinking where like I wouldn't want to cry in front of my parents because I would think that would bring them down and they'd have to worry about more. Or I didn't want to show my sister how much this was bothering me because I didn't want her to think I was judging her. And so I really just like kept all of these feelings in. And so I wouldn't even talk to my friends at school. It was just like, I really was just like, okay, I'm going to swallow this all down so I can really support the people around me. And I think especially like since this was happening with my little sister, as an older sibling, I felt this sense of responsibility that I could like help her see that there's a different way of living or having relationships. And also just like, if I was encouraging enough or spent more time with her, that I could really change like this situation. What I didn't know at the time is that like that's not really how these things work. And so it just continued to get worse. And I remember getting a phone call like when I was in high school from my parents, and they were like, we're taking her to the hospital and she needs to go to rehab. And I think she had just completed her first year of high school at the time. And when I heard that, I just felt like so much despair. Yeah, I just felt like I had failed. Like I had this mission that like I was going to change the situation through my own ability to make other people happy, which was like I was like, that's my quality. Like I can please other people. I can like, and I was like, I'm going to change the situation. And so, I was just like, wow, I felt like I had failed.
That's so much like pressure to put on yourself, and like especially feeling like you need to be this like glue in a sense to like hold things together, but then you yourself don't have any way to like really support yourself and take care of yourself. You're just kind of like, so consumed with like managing everyone else. At the time when you were in high school, because I know you had mentioned like in college was really when you, I think, more started to feel like this Buddhist practice was something that was your own. Were you chanting in high school, and like what did it look like at that time?
For sure. I definitely was, but I wasn't chanting a lot. Like I would try to chant every day, and I think at the time, especially I was actually I was in a Buddhist youth group where it's we play instruments and we perform at meetings together. I was in it with my sister. That was actually, I would say, like one of the continuing things that kept my sister and I like together, you know? Like I think we like that was a point in time when she would disappear all night, or she wouldn't come home, or we wouldn't be able to know where she is, or I'm studying for the SAT. Like our lives were starting to go down different tracks, but like there were a few things, and this being one of them, where I knew like every week we would like meet at the Buddhist center and we would practice together, and she had like true friendships there as well, I would say, people who were concerned about her and trying to support her, and I really just leaned on those people as well. I think it like helped to lean on people who like also knew her and like knew our family and who could really encourage me. And so there were challenging moments with that too, of course, because she was struggling with sobriety, but I really just wanted to support her. And so I think that was one of the main ways I was continuing to practice Buddhism at that time. And also my parents are such powerhouses. They're just so inspiring always. And just like really trying to support and encourage other people. So because, you know, I grew up in this practice and my sister grew up in this practice, a lot of the Buddhists that we had become familiar with, had become friends with, knew our family. And so this also like, I think my parents were able to get so much support from their Buddhist friends. They had this built-in community of people who like really believed in them and really like believed in my sister. And so I really think like this community being there was so important during this time, and it continues to be important, I think, as like my family shifts how we take on these challenges. Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like even as you were like grappling of feeling like holding all of this, you did still have this sort of like undercurrent of like, okay, you might still be like placing all the responsibility on yourself, like mentally or emotionally, but you had these other kind of resources to like keep yourself like moving forward without like totally, you know, crumbling under the weight. At the time, like I don't think I had the relationship with myself to necessarily believe this, but they were my friends and like in this community were constantly reminding me just how valuable my life was, and how precious I was, how each person like has this like unique purpose and like reason why they're like on this earth, and like that I was going to win without fail. Like all these, even though I didn't feel that way, I had people who were telling me these things and really trying to remind me. And so I think that was another important part of that that aspect of the community at that time. Even though my relationship with myself wasn't there yet, I had like such a supportive energy around me.
I love that you mentioned this, like your relationship with yourself, like, because totally I think about like when I was really like younger and still really just like developing my own sense of like self-worth and confidence and identity. Having like people in this community that could see that like capacity and those qualities in me, even if, like you said, my relationship with myself wasn't quite there yet. You know, they saw that potential, which eventually helped me really like develop that. But I know, like, now you're in Oakland, and that move was like a pretty, it signified a lot more than just like I'm moving somewhere. Like, it meant a lot in terms of like your personal development and your relationship with your family. So tell me, like, how did you end up in Oakland?
So yeah, I think like it was so difficult, and to like give context, like I moved a year after I had graduated college, which was like when things with the pandemic had started kind of having a semblance of normalcy. And so during the pandemic, when I was in college, that was actually like one of the like toughest times with like my family challenges, especially with my sister's addiction. And sort of that moment in time right before I moved, like really, yeah, it was so difficult. And I remember, you know, my sister everyone was struggling with their mental health, of course, but she was getting used to, you know, seeing sober coaches, being in community, and like having a sober community. And so when lockdown happened, of course, it like really impacted her, it impacted all of us. The day before the quarantine mandate, actually, in 2020, which was also, I think, the day before I found out all of my classes were going to be online. I wasn't going back to school. Mina had like a really intense episode and had to be taken to the hospital. And I remember going to the hospital with my dad to see her, and the nurses there telling me I couldn't see her because of this like impeding pandemic that like people were starting to prepare for. Is that only her parents could see her. So it was just like it was so devastating, just like sitting in the lobby. This like horrible thing had just happened, and her health was being compromised. And I didn't know when was the next time I was going to see her after that. And so just like sitting in the lobby, just feeling so defeated. And I think the pandemic was really like probably the darkest time for my family. Like I remember like having a conversation with her drug counselor, and him sharing with my family, you know, like if she continues like living this way, like she might not make it past 20. And so it was like, yeah, that was the point at which, like, even though I had grown up in this very empowering Buddhist practice, I was like starting to lose hope, like any other human being would, I think. I was starting to lose hope. I was starting to feel so much anger and betrayal and resentment towards her. Why was she doing this to our family? Like, why does this keep happening? What am I doing wrong? Will my family ever become happy? Like, I just would get these really negative like visions of the future where in like 20 years this is still happening. I was just like feeling so hopeless. And one of the things that really, I think, brought me and my parents together was that in Buddhism, I kind of mentioned it before, that we have this idea that each person's born with a unique mission, which is like your own purpose that only you can fulfill. And because of the history of addiction on my dad's side of the family, my parents were really encouraged me, saying, you know, like the reason like why this is so difficult is because your sister is going to change this tendency in the family. It's going to end with her. And and that's a lot of pressure, but it really like, that was like the deep belief that like they had in her. And so even though, it was so difficult at that time, and I really struggled with my Buddhist practice to feel like, how can I change this situation at all?
Totally.
This is so outside of myself. And I've tried, you know, to do what I can. And then one of the key moments that really shifted things for me was I had like been asked to support other Buddhists at the time. We were all remote. But I was asked, you know, would you be open to supporting like other young women, non-binary Buddhist practitioners in their practice? You know, I'm on the floor, guys.
Me? I can't even encourage myself.
Literally. What's interesting, when I was chanting, I was thinking about it this morning. The way you end up showing up with other Buddhists is very different from people pleasing. Like, because I was thinking about, you know, supporting other people. And, you know, I think, like, as my family was going through all this, my people-pleasing tendency was off the charts. I was, like, picking friends who were hurting me. I was picking romantic partners who were just, like, couldn't have been worse for me, with this, like, obsession that, like, you know, I can make them happy, like, no matter how poorly they treat me.
Yeah.
I think because my family situation was so dire, I was like, let me just see if I can still do this with other relationships. And so I was still battling that at the time. But I think, like, supporting other Buddhist members and having that first experience, I saw very clearly that, like, I just needed to show up as myself. And actually, whatever pressure I had on myself to be like, oh, I really need to inspire them or have this some sort of effect, like, they actually were doing that for me. I was actually the one that was walking away feeling more encouraged. And so it was really like, even though I was asked to support these members, it was really about, like, kind of meeting all these, you know, community members where they're at and, like, coming together and just, like, being honest with each other. What are we struggling with? What are we trying to transform? And it becomes such a empowering relationship. When I started to see how I can support people differently in a way that still is taking care of myself and feels true to myself, like that, like the light bulb started to go off a little bit. And that I remember, you know, after I had agreed to do that and was supporting members, getting, like, a phone call from my sister who was in rehab at the time. And I had told her, you know, I have these friends in college and the drama is so intense. Like, I don't even know if I want to go back to walk for graduation because I am just, like, my life condition, my, like, just feeling, like, feelings about myself were so low. And I was like, I don't know if I can face these people who have, like, made me feel so badly about myself. And she told me, don't give up. She was like, you've earned this and, like, you deserve this and don't give up. And I think, like, I was just, like, completely blown away that she was calling me from rehab, telling me not to give up, you know, and it was all the different realizations that it was just like, wow, here I am, like, telling her, you know, texting her, calling her, being like, you know, don't give up, your life is so valuable, like, you can do this, like, all these things. And then when I heard that from her, I was like, do I believe that about my own life based on how I've been treating it? Do I really believe, like, I'm infinitely valuable and precious and that, like, I need to, like, fight for myself? And so that was a point where I think, like, it really carries on to today where I started to see the connection between my struggles and my sister's struggles, which were, again, so vastly different. Like, just like we are, just, like, so different, facing such different things. Hers is, I think, more intense in many ways, of course. But I saw very clearly, like, she is helping me also break through these things. She's showing me something. Yeah. And so I think, like, before I left for Oakland, I was just, like, racked with guilt because my role in my family, as I saw it, was, like you said, to be the glue, to keep everyone together, to try and make sure they were happy. Like, I just felt like if I left, I was like, what's gonna happen? And it was really hard, but it was, like, the first big decision I made, like, completely for myself. And I think, like, deep down, I knew I had to do it. Like, I just, I was ready to experience something that wasn't New York City. I was able to do remote internships during the pandemic that were based in the Bay Area. And so I got to meet, like, really cool people interested in the art nonprofit world. And so I was like, wow, like, this is, like, a job I could do. Like, this is really cool. These are really, like, amazing people. And then I also had a partner here. And so I was like, I feel ready for this next stage. But it was so hard. It was so hard. I really felt like I was abandoning my family. But I think, like, with time, like I saw that wasn't the case, that I could still fight for my family's happiness, even though being across the country.
Yeah, I mean, so tell me, like, what was then the adjustment like? Like, this fear of, okay, if I leave, like, it obviously took a lot of, like, courage to decide, okay, I'm gonna do this thing for my happiness. I'm not gonna let, like, the fear and anxiety and worries about my family prevent me from going for my dreams. So you had all this courage, you make it there, and then, yeah, what did the reality end up like?
So yeah, I think when I got here, I was like, we're starting from the ground up. You know, I had some support here, but I was looking for new jobs. I was staying with my boyfriend's parents for a while I was looking for an apartment. And so like Channing was so important to me, like at the time. I really just was trying to focus on what do I want, and be really clear about myself. Like, you know, this is like such a Buddhist thing, but I was encouraged to do, of course, is like write down my ideal apartment with my ideal roommates and just chant about it. And so like I did that, and I was happy to see that I was actually able to get like this apartment with really wonderful roommates who became close friends. And I tried a lot of different kinds of jobs. I was trying to figure it out. I was a first grade substitute teacher. I was a barista. I was a tutor. Just like, yeah, it was really all over the place. And then I got my current job, which is I work at an Asian cultural center in Oakland, Chinatown. You know, as I was trying to do that, you know, I think things like for my family, they were still facing challenges, and I would get reports, of course, but I remember my sister actually visited me in Oakland, and it was just us two, and I was so nervous about it, because I think another like tendency I have is to worry, and so I was like thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and of course there were some hiccups. She like missed her flight. I was like, oh my god, like all these things, you know, it's not gonna be easy, I think. But I remember like after that we had a wonderful trip together. And then afterwards, my parents told me, you know, Mina saw, like, she kept telling us, like, she saw, like, the life that you've made for yourself, and she's so impressed. That actually, it ended up inspiring her. She decided to live in Asia for some time. Wow. So she decided to do a woofing program, so, like, a work exchange in Japan, where my mom's family is. And she was seeking, like, how can I really, like, like invest in my sobriety and have positive relationships, and like what should I do at this time? And then it became very clear to her that she wanted to do this. And so that was, I think, the first way I was able to be like, okay, like I can still like affect my family positively even though I'm so far away. And so she did that for a year, and I think because she was traveling so much, I actually didn't end up going home for a really long time. It ended up being a whole year, and my parents would visit me and we'd spend time here, and so I was still seeing my family, but it wasn't until this last October that I went home to be with my family. And I would say like 2024 was the year where I really was like, I'm gonna transform my relationship with myself. I think seeing like how my people-pleasing tendencies showed up at work, that was like, I can't live like this anymore. Like, I thought we were just talking like friends and relationships. Now, like work, like this is really just me. Like, I need to transform this thing that's causing me suffering. I was so much intention in 2024, like through like my Buddhist practice, through therapy, through like having conversations with like my parents and friends. I was like, I really want to like develop this loving relationship with myself and like develop such a deep sense of self-care. And I think like that really like changed the people I attracted into my life in terms of friends and relationships. Like there was a very clear shift there. And it was also like really hard. I think that when you identify this part of yourself that's familiar and then you're ready to let it go. Like I remember like calling my dad and being like, I don't think, like, I think I don't need, like, other people's validation anymore, and it's so scary, and I'm, like, crying, and I'm like, who am I if I'm not, if this isn't, like, a huge part of my life that, like, dictates so many relationships of mine, and he was just kind of like, congratulations, like, you've just, like, gave yourself so much freedom, and so... Like, Mina was in Japan, like, again, like, these, like, mirrors, I would always, like, chant and realize, and Mina was in Japan really trying to, like, heal her relationship with herself, and I was here, like, in my own way, trying to heal my relationship with myself, and so, like, I'm just so grateful that, like, this practice has allowed me to see those, like, situations so clearly as being, like, Mina's in Japan now, but I feel so connected to her. I feel like we're really fighting. And so that was like one, I think, way I was able to continue to, just like fight for my family's happiness while I was not with them.
Hearing you, I was thinking like about the Buddhist concept that like, when you change, then your environment reflects that. And I think it's so easy to want to like control other people and like, okay, I'm gonna figure out with my mind, how can I make them happy? How can I help them? Whatever. And then totally not pay attention to like yourself. And really, I think like hearing this, it's like so clear that like you kind of really digging deep in your own kind of inner transformation, how that is so tied to your family. And when we change, then things start to shift for them. I'm curious to know, like, in 2024, was there like a particular like time that you were like chanting or studying something that like you felt like, oh my gosh, I see, like, what's going on? Or was it like a gradual kind of process over the year?
I think it was a mix of both. I was working on these things. I think it was like absolutely what you're saying. Just that, part of it, I was like, oh, I'm so scared to not be with my family and support them. And to be physically so far away, but it was exactly like I did have to relinquish control. I had no choice. I wasn't there. And so I couldn't be there to be like, how am I gonna make this better? How am I gonna change how you're feeling right now? And make you like, just like ridiculous, like make my parents forget that they're going through this, because I'm like so joyful or whatever. Like, just like, I was really like so much pressure on myself, but I had to relinquish like all this control over the situation and really trust that like my family could also, like each of my mom, my dad, my sister, we each could really do this. And that was actually encouragement that I had received from another Buddhist, was like, we talk about karma as being like these deep-rooted tendencies, and every person has them. And through Buddhism, we try to transform these tendencies, these negative tendencies, or even you I guess see the positive ones too, but like really like look at our lives very clearly. And this person had encouraged me, like, your family, each member in your family, like, they have their own karma to transform. And if you try and transform it for them, you are taking away the opportunity for them to, like, really realize these profound things about their lives. And so I think that was an important thing for me to realize as I stepped back and as I moved away. I was like, okay, I really have to believe that each person, like, they can do this, I was continuing to chant, of course, for my family and to think about them while I was here, and, had many like amazing experiences, just like really seeing our situation so clearly, like through Buddhist study and like talking with other members. But it wasn't until like October 2024 where I really transformed my behavior, and I saw immediately how it affected my environment. I hadn't been home in a year, and my sister had just gone back from Asia she had this amazing trip, but it ended a little in a way that was challenging and difficult. She had come home to New York City, and I remember my parents telling me, like, your sister's really struggling. Things here are definitely hard. We're trying our best. And I was just then like so not looking forward to going home when I heard that.
Totally.
I was like, this is my vacation. This is like my time to relax. Am I going to go back and just like be in despair immediately? I was just like really not looking forward to it. I was really seeking, and I decided to MC a Buddhist meeting. And at that meeting, there was this quote, and it just like, I think still now just resonates so deeply when I think, what can I do? Like when I'm thinking about my family, like what could I possibly do? And it's Nichiren Daishonin, who was a 12th century Buddhist practitioner, and he wrote, if one joint of a bamboo is ruptured, then all the joints will split. One courageous action can break through the walls of obstacles that hinder our lives. And so I think like that was like the day before my flight, and I was just like, what am I going to do when I get there? Like, have I already lost? Like, no one's doing well over there. And then I heard this quote, and I was like, okay, like if I am that one joint in the bamboo that ruptures, then again, all the joints will split. So if I do something differently, my environment will react differently. That's what I'm going to focus on. And I think I even like on the plane, like listened to a Buddhability episode on like family dynamics.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, what am I gonna do? Yeah. And listening to the episode, I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm not gonna focus on changing anyone. Even like my sister, like I'm not going to try and change them. I'm just going to focus on like my own inner transformation and just showing up in a different way. And I think I was already going to show up in a different way by not trying to change everyone. And so, so just I think going in with that mentality, it completely transformed the trip for me. And in Buddhism, we talk about the oneness of life and its environment. And, I have a quote here from Daisaku Ikeda, who is a Buddhist philosopher. And he wrote, the Buddhist concept of the oneness of life and its environment teaches that our lives and environment are seemingly distinct phenomena. They are, in fact, two aspects of a single reality. This means that through a transformation in our hearts and minds, we can change our environment for the better and move our lives and society in the direction of harmony and peace. And so I think like one of the greatest things that I started to put into practice as a recovering people pleaser was reminding myself that like the greatest gift I can give to others is making sure I'm taking care of myself. Like, because then I can really show up present, and I can really just like be there with them, and whether it's listening or supporting or encouraging, but like it really has to come from me. Again, I was there, I was like, I'm not going to change anyone. I'm really going to also like focus on taking care of myself. And I also was able to like encourage my sister. We would do Gongyo every morning, which is chanting Namyo Renge Kyo and reciting the Lotus Sutra. And she got into the habit of doing it with me. And everyone, my parents and Mina just kept saying like, wow, like you're different. Like you feel so strong, and they just like really noticed these changes in me. And I think because I was so I wasn't focusing on changing my sister anymore, but rather just like supporting her from a genuine place, of course, but I'm like, I'm not going to try and change you. It allowed me to also be more courageous in like having more honest dialogues with her, which I think our relationship had needed for a long time. I think she had this idea that she didn't want to tell me like that she was struggling or what was really going on, because she didn't want to let me down or disappoint me. And I also really wanted to support her, but I didn't want to make her uncomfortable by bringing up these things. And so we were close, but we weren't talking about what was going on.
Yeah.
And I think part of that for me was like, I was trying to just keep in mind what she would want, like how I should, you know, conduct myself to make her feel the most comfortable and supported. And now, like, because I didn't want to try and change her behavior anymore, we started having these like really honest dialogues at that time. It was wonderful. Like, Mina had really was looking to get a job, and I was supporting her. And I remember I was really like holding back, you know, even just like, she was just like working on her resume, and I studied English in college, and I would think like there's a better way to rephrase that sentence, or, you know, like I'd just be like, are you sure you want to format it in this way? And these are like little things, you know, this is like not even like the point, but she'd be like, no, like this is what like feels right. And I'm like, instead of like being like, you know, let me do this for you, like move over, like, this is going to be best for you. I was like, you know what? You trust your gut.
Yeah.
You trust your gut. And I'm just going to walk away, because I also really wanted her to learn to believe in herself and trust herself. Mm-hmm. And so that involved me not trying to do things for her. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so she ended up getting a job, which was amazing. And I remember the day before my flight back home, we ended up having this dialogue where I was just like, you know, like you, like, I don't know, I get to really like connect like heart to heart and really be honest and like hear also like how she's doing. Like, she trusted me to like really hear these thoughts she was having. And yeah, just like our relationship, I realized was shifting. I felt like we were breaking new ground. It wasn't about how do I keep her happy, or, you know, distract people from sort of the devastating situation that's happening, but more like I want her to feel like she can reach out to me at any life condition, at any point, like whatever she's feeling, that she can rely on me. And I remember coming home the next day, and a few weeks later it had been my birthday, and she sent me this text message, which I'll read because I think it just made me realize, like, again, like I am impacting my family just by like really challenging my relationship with myself, really challenging how I show up differently. She wrote, "Thank you for giving me the motivation to move forward in my life and believing in me even when I don't. You've grown so much, and I'm so proud of you and the life you've built. It's inspiring to see you overflowing with happiness and confidence. You've really connected with who you are, and it makes me want to do the same."
Wow.
And so I immediately was just, I just like started crying.
Tears, yeah.
And I know, it's just like, because it couldn't have been, I was like, I couldn't have been more clear to me. I was like, she sees how hard I'm like working on myself too. And like that, I don't know, like, and by transforming this like people-pleasing tendency, or working on it, or being even more mindful about it, and then showing up differently in my family, there is an effect happening. I could transform something that was so deep in my life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was able to go back for the holidays and just like continue, you know, challenging myself. Similarly, just my family notices. And I remember like walking with my dad. He was like, no, there's this like concept in Buddhism called life condition, which is really just like, I don't know, I guess it's just like kind of the energy you're bringing with you, or like your attitude. And he told me, like, you know, your life condition is really healing our family. And I remember, again, like I was home for the holidays, and Mina and I would chant together. We chanted, and then like my dad like was like, oh, look at this quote, and it was in one of the Buddhist publications we have. I can read the quote. "Transforming family relationships requires more than just changing your mind. It takes courage, the kind that makes you feel vulnerable and like your heart's exposed. It's about confronting old patterns or deeply held beliefs, breaking cycles, and doing the hard work of checking what's really going on in your heart." And Mina and I read this together, And we were like, wow. And she like kind of just like took the magazine and like got up and started walking away. And I was like, what are you doing? And she was like, I was going to take a picture of this quote. And I was like, well, I was going to take a picture of this quote. So bring it back. We can both take a picture. And I was a very sweet moment of being like, wow, we both relate to this. We want to like keep this with us. Yeah. And I think like I reflect on just this whole arc of things, and I feel like it's not that I started to care less about these struggles, or I started to care less about my family. I felt like it was actually 10 times harder to not be so involved. And I really was like, okay, like the greatest care I can show my family is actually believing that we can do it. Like, these challenges still happen. Yeah. Like, my family's challenges are not over. Mm-hmm. Like, there's always something, yeah. You know? It really, even like this week, there was an obstacle that came up, and I'm like, and I'm human, and so I'm like, what the heck? But like, what I know, you know, I get, and I'm sad about it and frustrated. But what's different is that I don't have that same despair of like, will my family ever become happy again? Why is this happening to me? I can react. I can feel like, oh, this is like unfortunate, but you know, this is a part of our journey, and like we will absolutely overcome this. Stepping back has allowed me to also just have like a really new appreciation for my sister, and how hard she's fighting. And I think when you're trying to control someone, you see all the things that they're not doing. You see all the like ways they're not listening to you, that they're not like taking your advice. And every time like Mina relapsed, like throughout those years, I would take it so personally. I'd be like, I invested so much time and energy to making sure that you were happy, we were hanging out, or like, am I not doing enough? I don't understand. And now I'm just like at this place where I can have so much appreciation for how hard she's fighting in her own way. And I was studying again this week with some Buddhist members, and I remember this quote had come up that was like, the internal world is more difficult to change than the external world. And I was like thinking about that, and it just like allowed me to feel like, wow, like Mina's trying to do something that's really hard. You know, we can change her circumstances, but like what she's doing is transforming her inner world, and like that is much more difficult. And again, like through that, I'm like, she's continuing to show me like how I can be courageous. Like she, like I'm just like, now I'm like, have such a deep appreciation because I can see like how she's modeling courage, because she's really fighting. Even if she even if she has these hiccups and these challenges or obstacles, like she is continuing to come back and try again. And before, that was a source of frustration. Now I can really look at her and say, like, I'm so proud of you, and like I want to learn how to do that too. Like, you're teaching me so much right now. And so, yeah. And then my relationship with my parents, I think like now that I'm more communicative with them, our relationships have shifted. But yeah, it's like the obstacles have not gone away at all, completely, you know? And like, but I have faith that like our family is stronger than these obstacles now. Like, and I've just seen it through the way our relationships have shifted. And I just don't operate from despair anymore. Every time I'm chanting for Mina, I'm like, okay, I really want her to see like she can do this and that, and that she's so strong and all these things. And then I have to remind myself, I'm like, okay, do I feel this way about myself? Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, here she is reminding me that I also need to do this. And that's just like a new, like, fun thing that happens now, that I'm just like, if I'm going to support her and I'm going to tell her these things, I need to be doing that too. And so, yeah, there's just been so many things that have come out of this situation, like really unexpectedly. Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard, but we're doing it. Yeah. We're doing it.
Like, listening to you, I just, I feel like your kind of experience and your life really illustrates like what the kind of greatest benefits of Buddhist practice are. Like, we get these kind of like what are called conspicuous benefits. You know, we see a really tangible thing in our life, but the inconspicuous is like these, like, the way that your life is oriented, the way that you experience things. And I think like you being able to shift from someone that's like, your happiness, how you feel about the world and life is so dependent on your external, versus now like happiness and strength, like all of those things are dependent on just you and your life. That getting to that place can be really challenging, but I think once you experience it, you're like, oh, wow, okay, anything is possible. And for myself, I started to feel like, oh, of course, you know, my friends and family can feel this way. Now I know from my own experience that it really is possible to like reach this kind of like life state or have this relationship with myself. And even with that, like, I don't always feel that way, but because I've experienced it, at least I know, okay, if I keep chanting, I can like reawaken that sense of like hope and courage and like confidence. Maybe to kind of like, close things out, I as you know, always end with a piece of advice. So what advice would you give to someone that is in the midst of like supporting a loved one, going through something that's really difficult? What advice would you give them?
You know, in Buddhism, we recognize, this is like one of the very first like recognitions. This was like Shakyamuni, you know, this was like really like one of the first things. He was like, life is full of suffering. Like, I feel like Buddhism, we get this rep, it's like it is very positive and it is very, but we're very real also, I would say. And like, it's just like, we're seeing it as it is. What might feel like, oh, how are they so positive, is just how we are reacting to it, what we're deciding to do from that moment on. And so we all are going to suffer, we're all going to have these challenges and obstacles. But I think what Buddhism teaches me, and what I've really seen, like through my relationship with my sister, through our new communication, even though life can be so difficult, like it doesn't mean that happiness is not worth fighting for. And so I think my first piece of advice would be to not give up. Of course, it's like every day you need a reminder that it can be so much easier to just give in to despair and be like, I have no control over this situation. This is just how my life's gonna be. But I really like, and that was a true fear of mine, that this was just gonna be my life. And now it's like, no, I'm like taking, I'm deciding to take this situation and like really change it. And like, I want to see myself and my family become happy. So what do I need to do? Starting with my relationship with myself to really make sure we're on that path. And I think that's sort of like the other part of it for me. You know, of course, like there may be someone that that is really suffering, and like you don't know what to do, and there's such despair. And I think that was the other piece for me, was looking at like, okay, what's that first cause I can make? What's that first step in changing the situation? So I think also just like looking at how can you make that one difference, and show up differently, and then you'll absolutely see a change in your environment. And sometimes that one change is like the hardest change. Like it really that's like might be the hardest part of it, because then once you see your environment react differently, it's like, okay, like we're here now, you know, we're all learning to adapt to this. And so, I think both just like not giving up, and then also like, chanting and thinking about like, how can you transform the way you show up, or the way you feel about the situation. Give yourself hope, and like give yourself like that sense of determination, and it will like absolutely affect the people around you.